I shoot 2 frames of my animation. It's sufficient with this kind of very soft image, soft edges, that it looks continuous. A perfectionist might shoot 1 frame per image, but it's twice the amount of work. And animators always look for less work to do because it's a lot of work. This drawing will be just 1/12 of a second on the film. So though my films look very free, it's a lot of discipline and control to keep them looking free. This is a little boy who is coming in to kiss his grandmother. And it's a story about a Jewish family in Montreal. And the grandmother is sick. She's dying in the back bedroom that the little boy wants to have. And he doesn't have much patience with her.
Her bedroom had actually been promised to me for my 7th birthday. But now I had to go on sharing a room with my sister. So naturally, I was resentful when each morning before I left for school, my mother insisted that I go in and kiss my grandmother goodbye. Boy-o, boy-o, was the only sound my grandmother could make. I wondered if she knew I was waiting for her room. After 2 years, I protested to my mother.
What's the use of telling her I'm going here or I'm going there? She doesn't even recognize me anymore.
Don't be fresh. She's your grandmother.
Radio's biggest Western detective program. Tonight we're about to hear another episode in a baffling mystery. Secret Mission. Welcoming you to Full Radio Time. Produced... Come on, boy.
John Weldon is working on a collaborative film called Elephant Trio. 3 animators were asked to reflect on the meaning of human existence. In each story, an earthling carries his soul on the journey of life. For his segment, John Weldon uses ordinary pencil crayons and an extraordinary sense of humor.
In a way, it's very similar to regular cell animation, but the main difference between this and cell animation is that paper is opaque. You can't see through it. So there's no background. Any background that's going to be there, you're going to have to draw on every frame. So I put in my little snake, and I'll put in a horizon line here, and I'll draw in some mountains in the background here, right on the same piece of paper. Now, it's good to keep the background fairly simple because you're going to have to draw this over and over again on every different frame of the film. I'm also going to draw on, these are some rocks on the ground here and so on, and some eggs in the foreground. There are a lot of eggs in this film. This is not what's actually going to go on film, What we do now is trace it off on another piece of paper, usually with ink. Now, you might get an assistant to do this if you want to work quite quickly. But at this stage is where it all gets neatened up. So I'm tracing off this rather rough completed picture here, and I think I'll use an orange outline for this egg here. It's nice to be fairly neat in this, but you don't have to be too neat. These things do go by at about 12 every second, so if there's a little bit of roughness here and there, it doesn't matter that much. But here's an example of what some of the pictures look like in their final form. The nice thing about this kind of animation is that the entire picture is there on one piece of paper when you finally finish it. So you can actually get a pretty good idea of what the film's going to look like just by flipping it like that. You can actually see a bit of the action there.
Every animated film requires a few essential ingredients: one camera, one artist, and thousands of images that come together to make motion. Animator George Unger is working on a film called The Wanderer. It's about a dark stranger who brings evil to a quiet village.
This is the storyboard that I use as my guide for the film. This outlines every scene, all the faces, all the costumes, just about every cut that I'm using. Before I sit down and animate, I have to always go back to this storyboard as a reference to what I'm doing. This is probably my most important tool to show the design of this film. It's as important as the story. And the design is all done in the storyboard. I can't sit down when I'm animating and be making those kind of decisions. Those are too fundamental to the film, and they have to be made at the outset, just like, I guess, in a live-action film. The historical or costume aspects are all planned out in advance. This is where all my information is. This is my Bible. I've been at it for about 1 3/4 years, from the conception to the stage I'm at. It took me about 4 or 5 months in pre-production to adapt the story, make sure it was working as a visual story. It's based on a short story by Michel Tremblay, a French-Canadian playwright. But it's a very liberal adaptation of the story because I wanted to make it visual as opposed to narrative. I have no dialogue or narration in this film, which is forcing me to rely upon purely animation, pantomime, and camera moves to tell the story. The technique is it's what I call a wiping technique. I'm subtracting more of the paint than I am adding, although I do add. And it originates actually, I got the idea by observing Japanese potters who, after they'd baked their pottery in the kiln, would then go on and add glazes and do a variety of things with the paint on top of the pottery. Now my surface here is the same hard kind of surface as ceramic is, and very smooth. And just like the Japanese would go in and paint a landscape on some of the pottery and then wipe it off with materials in their fingers, I got the idea of pursuing this technique by taking away paint more than adding it. And it gives me a lot of very interesting effects. This is my film magazine. It's got 35mm film in it. The camera is situated such that it will face directly down onto my artwork. And here we go. Just going to drop it onto the pegs where it's secure. That's 2 frames. And now I'm ready to begin my next phase of movement. The way I do that is I take the end of my brush, which is pointed, that is the back end of it, and I very quickly draw out the position where the proportions will be in the next image. In this case, there's very little movement, so the objects are fairly close together in each frame. One hand of this character is caressing this crystal ball, and he's looking into the ball and smiling at himself because he's impressed with himself. It's part of the story. He's been given these magical gifts by a traveling minstrel. And this character on the right, not only is he looking into the crystal ball, but he's anticipating to turn around towards the other character and throw it.
We can put it back in place again.
The film Charles and Francois was created using a technique called cutout animation. Filmmaker Co Hodeman illustrates each character separately. Then he choreographs them to move within a 3-dimensional set. In the film, a grandfather and grandson share an extraordinary relationship. They're able to grow old together.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
today's edition of the Golden Age, we have a pleasant surprise for you. Two old companions who between them have 200 years of experience. It's a great pleasure to welcome to our program two men both 100 years old.
As they are moving from their living room where they are playing cards into the television studio,